This video is about the stages of clay, and you previously heard me go over these stages multiple times in videos, as well as you saw the lecture, the slide presentation, What is Clay? But I thought I would create a video that specifically went over the various stages of clay because it's very important. In order to be successful in working with clay, you have to really understand these stages. So the first stage, which you're all familiar with it by this time, is slip. And I'll start this by going with the wettest to the driest, and then beyond the driest, which is the fired. So slip, which we've all seen before, is that gooey, watered, hydrated enough paste that is often used for slipping and scoring, attaching clay to clay, decorative purposes, etc. The stage after the slip is just considered wet clay. And wet clay is just workable clay, right? So you have clay that's squishy, malleable enough to roll out, squeeze, pinch, bend, do a variety of techniques with. This is also the stage where you would throw on the potter's wheel. That aside. The next stage after clay, it gets drier, and that's what we refer to as the leather hard stage. And leather hard, as previously mentioned as well, is when the clay is truly feels like leather. And it just is called that leather hard term because it enables you to hold up a piece of clay and it doesn't move. It's dry enough so that it does not warp, it does not bend, but it can be an excellent stage for a variety of purposes. And those purposes of when we use leather hard clay are to create slabs. You can also carve. You can do a variety of service techniques at this stage. If we were this semester throwing on the potter's wheel, you would see that this is the great stage to do trimming. It's pretty endless, but it's a really wonderful stage. But it's very important to grasp what true leather hard means, because if it's a little bit past leather hard, meaning it's a little bit more dry, you can run into a lot of problems. As well as if it's not leather hard, if it's a little bit before leather hard, if it's kind of flopping a bit, if it's warping, it's not ideal. Like leather hard is, there's a definite point. If you truly want a leather hard to do certain techniques, you truly need it leather hard. Beyond leather hard is when all the water has evaporated and dried, and that is called bone dry. And you can see, it's interesting to point out now that the color variation from here, which is again the leather hard, to here, which is bone dry, and see how much darker this is than the bone dry. It's also very cold, right, because of the water content, where the bone dry, again, remember, is warm to the touch. You put up to your cheek, you can feel that all the water has evaporated and it's truly bone dry. Keep in mind, again, bone dry stage is very, very fragile. So when it comes time to transporting your work to the campus, you have to be really careful. Really careful, meaning you have to find a shoebox, support, find foam, an old piece of cloth, an old shirt, to wrap it and kind of cocoon it somehow so that if it does slide, it won't knock and break, because any little dings or any little movement with bone dry, because it's so fragile and all the water is evaporated, it can break very, very easily. The stage beyond the bone dry is what we refer to as bisqueware, or some people call it biscuit. And that means that it's the first firing that takes place, And keep in mind, it's really, really important. I cannot stress this enough. When you have a piece that's been fired at the bisque stage, it is no longer able to be reclaimed. And we've run into this problem before with students where they'll think that they can take a hammer to this or break it with a mallet and break it down and then put it back in the reclaim bucket. And that is beyond disastrous, right? So we really, once it's fired, it cannot be broken down. It cannot be reclaimed. It cannot no longer be recycled. So really, truly remember that. It's very crucial. But however, if it is bisqueware, it can add a lot of other potential for working techniques, right? So once it's bisque fired, that's when all the water has evaporated and it's fired enough to create this strength to it where then it can take glaze, and glaze will adhere to it, it'll absorb to it. And that's where we then, after it's glazed, we fire it, and then that's where you have glazed work. And I'm going to come closer for you to see, hopefully, the glass-like color. This is the bare clay, because you'll see down the road, we do not ever glaze the bottom. Anything that touches the kiln shelf in the kiln cannot have glaze on it, because if it does, it'll fuse to the kiln shelf and they will forever be one. And that you do not want, right? So you always have to have a bare piece of bare clay. We'll go over that in great detail when it comes time to glaze, but you can see now that hopefully you can get a sense of what that skin looks like of glaze. I also have what's called a shard here. It's just it was once a lovely bowl. It broke, but you can still see the clay color inside, and hopefully you can see that thin layer of skin, which is the glaze. And that's what allows it, when glaze is applied, especially to functional work, it allows you to be able to drink and eat from it, because it creates that barrier where it doesn't pit and there's nothing that's going to go through that. It makes it much more vitrified and non-porous, so that it can it can take being able to use and eat out of, as well as for, even if it's not functional, glaze can make it that much more durable, even if it's sculpture or really whatever. Creates that nice glassy final finish. That's also not to say that you have to glaze, and we'll get into that again down the road with glazing. But I just wanted to go over all the stages to make this as clear as possible, so that you can completely have confidence that you know exactly what stage, and you can time it just right so that you can be very successful in your projects.